This is Fountain
Every
Street
week I find
Church.
it hard to find the best ones, but somehow, like I said, you'll hear what I'm trying to say even when the words
Here,
are
we strive to free the mind, grow the soul, and change the world. Here, there is freedom to doubt and freedom to believe. Here, you can find a house of prayer for all people.
The swallow up Jonah.
Welcome to Fountain Street Church. Join us on the journey.
Well, it was another busy week in our little village here. It's a little slower now that Art Prize is over, and I am so grateful that we had it, and I am so grateful that it's over. But even so, since last week we hosted a Hohenstein lecture. The former Mayor Logie was here with Mr. LeBrant discussing the possible constitutional convention, which you will supposedly vote on, if you vote, which you will do, on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. How could you not vote? It's the only way I know for sure to make all the ads go away. Which is partly why we were so glad to cheer on the Chilean miners, because at least there was something of unambiguous decency going on in the world. And now let's be really good and leave them alone. Lots of things going on. While you weren't watching, a memorial took place this week and a wedding. Do you know we have a weekly meditation group that starts in our chapel every Wednesday, and now there's a Zen study meditation group. In fact, the leader was part of our early service today. The world is a full place. And every week I try to find something to hold on to and then try to offer it to you, and I'm never sure if it's going to work. People sometimes ask, where do sermons come from, as though they're wondering if it's about Santa Claus or sex. And I think the real question is, where do sermons go? Which is to say, they always start in a place I know, they never land where I expect them to, so it's an adventure for me as well as for you. And that's why I always begin my sermons with words out of the book of Psalms, a plea that perhaps I might get something right. Those that read, may these words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be found true in thy sight, O thou who art my rock and my redeemer. Well, Halloween is coming, as you heard me gesture before. It's now almost as popular a holiday as Christmas in terms of buying. Although we don't buy gifts, we buy lots of candy, of course, and people have parties. Have you noticed that most of the popular holidays, the most popular ones, all take place in the darker months of the year? Thanksgiving, Valentine's Day, Christmas, New Year's, Halloween. And I think it has to do with the shorter daylight. I really do. Maybe it's because we need to have more fun when it feels so gloomy outside. But at least Halloween needs to be dark. I understand the anxieties of parents and children, but trick-or-treating at 4 in the afternoon seems to defeat the whole very purpose of the thing. Of course, it has to be dark because you have to be spooky, at least in some way. I bring this up because as the darkness begins to grow, and we do darkness very well here in West Michigan, at least for the next 4 or 5 months, it reminds me of a spiritual state called the dark night of the soul. I'm subject to a version, or at least an attenuated version, of something called seasonal affective disorder. You've heard of that? That's the fancy name for when it's dark outside, it's dark inside too. But I think there's a reality not only to the physical part, but to the spiritual part. That term, the dark night of the soul, was coined by St. John of the Cross, but you can find it in other spiritual traditions as well. It's a time of spiritual aloneness, of not so much despair, but isolation, of wandering in inner deserts the way Israel wandered in its mythical desert. You think it might be quite rare, but it's actually quite common, and it seems to be more common among professedly religious people than not. If you noticed in the news a year or so ago, the papers of Mother Teresa, once they were opened, revealed her to have profound doubts about her faith for most of her life. Which is not to say she ceased believing, but she ceased believing that she knew that she was right. That it was a little bit like calling into one of those anechoic chambers and not even hearing her own echo. That's the dark night of the soul, of believing something and not knowing if there's any truth to it at all. But of course, you can't stop believing in everything, because then that just confirms you're in the middle of an isolated and desperate and dark night. It's a deserted place, the dark night of the soul, and we use the word deserted the same way we use desert, places of waste and wildness. It's a time of not knowing where you are or where you were going, and that really is spooky, and I think we've all had those moments. The story of Israel in the wilderness says it was a time for a purpose, though, that they were led along by the pillar of cloud or the pillar of fire, to which you heard references earlier. It's a great story, and it's supposed to tell of a time of purification, of arduous struggles, a kind of heroic journey, if you want to call it that. Now, I reviewed this heroic journey in preparation for these sermons and discovered that it's far from heroic. At almost every chapter in the book of Numbers, for example, the Israelites decide they don't like it and would rather go back to Egypt. Now, this is in the midst of the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire, where God is busy zapping people every other page. So it isn't as though they stop believing in God. They just get really tired of walking around in the blessed desert. Can't we go back and sit down for a while? But I don't think that that's the point. It's not a heroic journey at all. I don't think it actually happened, not only the journey, but especially the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire. And if that's an important part of your faith structure, I'm sorry, but I just don't buy it. Not the miracle, but that there was a purpose to it all. We like to think that hardship has a purpose. Whenever something bad happens and you talk to someone or you see it on the news, almost every time someone will say, well, everything happens for a reason. I don't buy it. I think things just happen. And I don't think they always have a reason. And I think bad things happen for no good reason at all. Mind you, good things happen for no good reason at all either. Things happen. And those who have wandered in the desert, personally, spiritually, physically, those who have been lost or homeless in some form, know that this is wishful thinking. And it might prop you up from day to day, but it is a wish. It's not a fact. And I want to acquaint ourselves with the difficulty of thinking that somehow even our difficult times are to some good purpose. It's to train us or teach us or give us insight or wisdom. I think there's real danger in thinking there's always a purpose to our tough times. When I was a very young man, maybe 14 or 15, my father had a colleague who suffered then what was something you have heard of called a detached retina. You know what that is? When the cells in the back of your eye let go of, and you can't see. And in those days, because I am now sincerely approaching 60, they did not use lasers to fix it. They opened up your eyeball and and they went inside and they sewed it down with stitches. Is that icky or what? But the result of this was that you couldn't move your eyes for a number of days. Can you imagine not moving your eyes at all? Do you know how they did it? I was fascinated. I remembered this my whole life. They made him wear a pair of glasses in which everything was blacked out except for a pinhole of light. Because it turns out when there's a pinprick of light, you cannot not look at